Let's talk here for a little bit about Kentucky basketball inside Dick Vitale's 2024-25 preseason Sweet 16. You can find this article over on ESPN.com. Was released just a couple of days ago. He talks about the era of free agency, how it's hit all collegiate sports. It's been interesting to see how coaches who used to sell a program and a university lifestyle have now become general managers, so to speak, putting together teams based on market value. He said, with that in mind, let's take a preliminary look at the top teams heading into the season and some of their key players. These are the contenders, according to Vitale, and he has the Kansas Jayhawks, unsurprisingly, as the number one preseason team heading into next season. It's almost a letdown if you look at on paper at teams like Kansas, teams like Alabama, teams like Duke. It would be almost a letdown for these stacked juggernaut type squads to roll into 2024-25 and not only have a successful regular season, but not make a deep NCAA tournament run. There are so many different teams on paper this season that just look solid from top to bottom. And the Jayhawks, I think, deservedly so, should be number one. KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, DJ Harris, AJ Storrs coming in from Wisconsin, Rylan Griffin from Alabama, Zeke Mayo, who was a bucket at South Dakota State, Noah Shelby from Rice. They also have a couple of really high-profile prospects. I mean, Kansas is really, really, really good. And you start to work your way down the list here. It's obviously, like Dick said, the top 15 teams, or 16, in the country. And for the most part, when we've been looking at these preseason rankings, Kentucky's either been unranked, towards the bottom half of the top 25, or just barely outside of it. Like if you're looking at a top 25 and 1 or something like that, you've seen Kentucky placed in a variety of spots, but usually not very high. And I would say over the past month and a half or so, you've started to see Kentucky rise in certain aspects, getting closer to that top 15. For Vitale to have Kentucky at 15 out of 16 teams. Some of you may say, well, that's towards the bottom of the rankings. I still say, hey, if you did a full top 25, I think Kentucky fans would absolutely take a preseason 15 ranking, especially considering all of the different factors. Your coach left for another SEC program. You have a completely new roster. You had to build it in essentially a month with a new head coach. A lot of things are trying to be figured out. How will this team look on paper? We're not going to truly know the ceiling of this team until we start to see them actually perform. So at number 15, I'm very happy with this. I don't think that there's any reason to be disgruntled or upset with this. There are a couple of other teams that are above Kentucky that you could get upset with. But I think 15 is a very fair spot to put UK heading into the season. If they're able to do the thing and win a large majority of their non-con games, if they're able to beat Duke in Atlanta, which is a tall task, if they are able to go on the road and defeat Clemson and Ohio State, and possibly go and beat Gonzaga as well, very difficult tasks. Again, I want to reiterate, if they're able to get out of those 4 games, a win against Gonzaga and a win against Clemson, or a win against Ohio State, I think a lot of fans would be really excited, and I think Kentucky at that point should be ranked 15th or somewhere around there. If they're able to get a win against everybody except for maybe the Zags in Seattle, you get a win against Duke, you get a win against a top 25 team in Ohio State, you really start to build a strong resume, pick up some quad 1 wins if you're able to beat Clemson on the road as well. If you're able to beat Louisville, who could end up being a quad 1 team at the end of the day if they are able to have the season that Pat Kelsey and company expect to have. Kentucky's got the opportunity to really build the resume here, and that's when you start to sort of expect a rise in the rankings, so to speak. You should also, I think, expect a dip from some of these other teams that I just really don't believe in. And one of them I've harped a lot on recently. I'm going to try not to harp on them a ton in a second, but this is what Dick Vitale has to say about Kentucky. With no Sweet 16 appearances since 2019, the Wildcats are looking to make a huge jump with new coach Mark Pope. With 9 transfers and 3 freshmen, The Wildcats need time to mesh and gain confidence, but should be primed for March. Notes that Kentucky has no returning players, and then also adds Kentucky is building from the ground up. The big-time transfer portal additions, he starts with Jackson Robinson and Otega Owe, Kobe Brea, Amari Williams, Butler, Carr, Garrison, Krisa, Ulmanor, all of the players that you know and love. Travis Perry, Colin Chandler, Trent Noah, all here as freshmen. The Wildcats coming in at number 15 in Vitale's rankings. Again, I'm very happy with this. Hit the nail on the head. I think this team needs a little bit of time to kind of gain confidence and mesh, which really does bring into question how they are able to perform in that Duke game. If Kentucky's able to win that game, by the way, oh, man, I think a lot of fans are going to be excited as the season goes on. But I like this. I'm very, very pleased with this. I want to kind of talk here for a little bit about some of the teams surrounding Kentucky. There's a team underneath Kentucky that I actually think could possibly be ranked higher if you wanted to. And there are a couple of teams that are right above the Wildcats that I think could be ranked lower. Before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys, if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. There is a Locked On Kentucky Discord. In case you have not checked it out, it's a place for anybody in Big Blue Nation to talk about all things Kentucky basketball, football, baseball. EA Sports College Football is officially out. One of our members is actually trying to start an online dynasty league. If you want to get in on that, you can go and check out my Twitter /X at @LanceDahl_, and you can see pinned at the top of my profile a link to join the Discord. Again, at @LanceDahl_, link to join that Discord at the top of my profile. It's free. It's just a place for a bunch of us to chat about what's going on with Big Blue Nation. All right, wrapping up the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. So we've talked about here Kentucky ranking number 15 in Dick Vitale's preseason Sweet 16. I want to discuss here a few teams surrounding the Wildcats and kind of give my thoughts on where they're at. St. John's comes in as the 16th team in this Sweet 16. The Red Storm barely missed the NCAA tournament last year with Rick Pitino at the helm. Man, Rick Pitino has been as big of an advocate for the Wildcats this season as I've seen anybody be this offseason. It's a shame Kentucky didn't get an opportunity to play St. John's this year, that we have to wait one more season to see the Red Storm either come to Lexington or Kentucky go to play at MSG against them. But I'm very excited about the fact that we'll get to see Pitino and Pope square off and what should be, what I would expect to be an incredible game. If St. John's is able to kind of maintain their status as a borderline top 25 team, mid to low top 25 team, I mean, that should be an extremely competitive game, if not one Kentucky loses. But St. John's, man, their roster this year looks really solid. RJ Lewis is coming back. Simeon Wiltshire, Brady Dunlap. You've also got a couple of transfer portal additions that Kentucky also kind of wanted. Kadari Richmond from Seton Hall. Devion Smith from Utah, who was one of the best assist men in the entire country a season ago. They've got some really good players here. Also, a couple of really high-profile freshmen. Jaden Glover being the biggest addition here on paper. This is a good team. This is a team that I love being inside this top 16. I would have Kentucky and St. John's ranked above the next two teams I'm going to talk about. One of them, some of you are going to claim as bias. The other, I think you can understand where I'm coming from. It's getting to a point where I've talked about them I think 3 times this offseason now, where some of you may classify it as hating. It's not hating. We're a metrics-based show. We talk about numbers. If your numbers are not good and you do not perform in the wins and loss column, which is the most important number of all, I don't understand why you're being ranked high in the preseason, especially when it's happened before. And yes, I'm talking about the Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M. I'm going to pull up the Ken Pomp stats again, and I'm not going to talk about it a ton today. Texas A&M last year was one of, I think they might have been preseason ranked 5th. They were a top 10 team coming into the year after bringing back a lot of different pieces. Wade Taylor, Tyrese Radford, Manny Obasaki, Jace Carter, Solomon Washington, Anderson Garcia, who is one of the better rebounders in the nation. They have a lot of those guys running it back again. But do you remember what happened last season after A&M was ranked, top 10 to start the year? At one point, they were 15-13 and 3 games behind 500 in SEC play. They had to win 5 straight, 4 of those games away from College Station, to get into the NCAA tournament. They had to beat Georgia. They had to beat Mississippi State. They had to beat Ole Miss, who at that point had just given up at the end of the year. They had to beat Ole Miss again. Then they had to beat Kentucky. And in that Kentucky game, they just went ballistic from 3 for absolutely no reason. 11 of 26, by the way, for a team that statistically was, I think, the 3rd worst three-point shooting team in the nation before they played the Wildcats. They ended up finishing 342nd. That's how good the performance was, I might add. They also scored 90 points in the loss to Florida while shooting 38%. So they caught fire after being bad the entire year. Wade Taylor, who can get a bucket. This is not on him. I'm not knocking him individually. He can get a bucket. He gets a lot of points. The reason he got a lot of points was because he had a lot of volume. He shot 302 threes and made 98 of them. 32.5% is not efficient enough. It's underneath the Division I average for me to say, hey, Wade Taylor, alongside Henry Coleman, Solomon Washington, Manny Obasaki, different guys here that are coming right back to the program for an offense that was 341st in effective field goal percentage, was one of the worst teams in the SEC in three-point percentage, dead last in two-point percentage, 13th in free throw percentage, 14th in block percentage. It's not enough for me to say, oh, all of those guys are back, and at one point they were 15-13 and had to get lucky. It's like, what, a 22 win team that you're projecting out here? If they manage to not have a slump against some really good SEC competition, by the way, the SEC's better than it was a season ago, I think. Yeah, it's not enough for them to be top 14. They're right above the Kentucky Wildcats. Is A&M a top 25 team? Sure. But 14th over St. John's and Kentucky? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't have as much of a gripe with the Arkansas Razorbacks as I do Texas A&M. They're also not a top 15 team. Not right now. I'm sorry. This team is comprised of a portion of Kentucky players from a season ago and a bunch of high-profile freshmen who are ranked highly for a reason, and a bunch of high-profile freshmen that can't shoot on paper. They cannot shoot. The thing that kept Kentucky in games last year was their ability to shoot the basketball. Arkansas's staff is going to be primarily comprised of former Kentucky assistants and the former head coach of UK. Jonas Adu is going to be a very good defender. Adu Thiero, I think, is going to be a good defender. Trevon Brazil should be a good-ish defender. If you, as a staff, could not coach 2 lottery picks and some of the best freshmen in the nation, apparently, to even an average defensive output, how are we supposed to expect you to do it with this team? And then also, you have fighting you the fact that you brought in a ton of players that cannot shoot the basketball. You're going to have to be overly reliant on what happens at the rim. And you've got guys, to be fair, you've got guys that can score there. Wagner, Janelle Davis from FAU can fill it up. Boogie Flan can score at the rim. He's a high flyer as well. He's fun to watch. Zvonimir Ivicic at times can score at the rim. Billy Richmond can absolutely do it. Carter Knox can absolutely do it. They can score at the rim. But if you run into trouble, if you run into Auburn, if you run into a team like Texas A&M, who's really good on the glass, you're going to get shut down because you don't have enough outside shooters, guys that can knock it down consistently. Now, I may eat my words here. I may end up being completely wrong, and Arkansas may be one of the better three-point shooting teams in this conference. On paper, their options are limited. Boogie Fland and honestly, Janelle Davis are probably their two best options. And outside of that, they don't have a ton to be excited about outside of the perimeter. I think it's not enough reason to knock them outside of the top 25. They're a top 25 team on paper. But top 13, with that being a primary weakness and also coaching concerns, which, by the way, completely just a heartfelt moment here for the show, just an honest moment. I would have said the exact same thing about Kentucky if this was the offseason that we were gifted. I would have said we're going to be better on defense, hopefully, if the coaching staff can get it together. But we don't have a ton of shooters, and that's what made us good last year. So are we just kind of reverting back to the offense of old? I'm kind of concerned if we don't have a Sheboy out there, how we're going to operate at a high efficiency rate. I'm going to say the same thing about Arkansas. They could prove me wrong. They could just run and dunk. That could be their team, and it could be fun to watch, and it could be effective. They could play better defense, and that could solve all their problems. But there are concerns on paper, and there are concerns about how this team's going to, frankly, be coached. Would have said the same thing about Kentucky, especially coming off of that loss to Oakland. It would have been, this is it. That would have been it for Cal. We would have said, heading into the offseason, this is the last one. This is the last time we're doing this. And you're kind of going back to what you used to do. So let's see if it works. Arkansas, top 25 team, not a top 13 team, in my opinion. I think St. John's, Kentucky, I think on paper right now, they are more complete in all aspects of the game. On paper. Now we'll see how they perform. I may end up being wrong. Arizona at number 12. Purdue at number 11. Have no issue with that. I think you could legitimately put the Arizona Wildcats a little higher. They returned 4 of their top 8 scorers. Caleb Love is back. Again, not big on the efficiency that Caleb Love had, but I think that offense with players surrounding him, I think that offense does kind of lend itself to be more efficient, even whenever you have players like him who are high volume, but not like the best when it comes to efficiency and shooting percentage. But Purdue, guess what? They got another really tall center, 7'3" player, Daniel Jacobson. Freshman is probably going to be an impact player for them immediately. 5 of the top 8 scores are back. Funny enough, Auburn's here at number 10, Purdue at number 11. Auburn and Purdue just scheduled a 2-year series. One of them happening in Birmingham, which is in Alabama, and then another in Indianapolis next year. So that's going to be really fun to watch these two tangle. But Auburn has a very good front court once more. More efficient than they were shooting the basketball, I think, a season ago. I think a little bit more physical at different aspects. And they were a very physical team last year. I think Auburn deserves to be in this top 15. Duke, I think, could be a little higher here. They got a nice blend of youth and then experience. It kind of mashes together in a weird way, but I like Duke's roster. Gonzaga at number 8, I think they could possibly be a couple of spots higher. I think they could be higher, honestly, than somebody like, I think if you put Gonzaga and UConn together right now, I would take the Bulldogs to win that game in just a neutral site. But Gonzaga at number 8 because they bring so much back. I think they're going to be really good. Baylor's going to be nuts, dude. Baylor's going to be nuts. Langston Love, Jaden Nunn is back. You've got one of the best players in the country, and VJ Edgecombe, who's going to be insane. Norchad Omier is here from Miami, previously at Arkansas State, if I'm not mistaken. And I think also, like, Utah, it's not Utah Valley. Maybe I'm wrong. It's a team out in Utah. He's been around the block, Norchad has. Jeremy Roach from Duke, who's one of the nation's best three-point shooters last year and also one of the best guards in the nation, period. Baylor's going to be so good. Then you have North Carolina. 5 of their top 8 scores are back. RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Elliott Cadeau, Jalen Withers, Jalen Washington. You add Cade Tyson from Belmont, who is such a North Carolina player. You've got a couple of 5-star prospects in Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. Like I said earlier, college basketball is going to be so fun this year. I'm so excited. The fact that college football is almost back, the fact that we get to talk about Mark Stoops and Kentucky football with SEC Media Days in a few days, and we also get to talk about what's happening with actual practices as we get closer to college basketball season. I'm so excited. It's all about to be back, man. I'm thrilled. Iowa State at number 5 returned their top 4 scorers from a team that was also just defensively dominant at times, and they absolutely destroyed Houston in the Big 12 tournament. And speaking of the Cougars, they're here at number 4. 8 of their top 10 scorers with LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp in the backcourt. It's a good year to be a college basketball fan, man. UConn's coming back looking for a three-peat. 5 of their top 9 scorers are back. Alabama at number 2. 3 of the top 5 in Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, Latrell Wrightsell. They brought in an excellent transfer portal class as well, and they got some really good, excellent scores from the freshman class as well. Kansas, Bama, UConn, Houston, Iowa State, North Carolina, Baylor, Gonzaga, Duke, Auburn, Purdue, Arizona. I mean, that's such a good top 12 right there. I mean, that is genuinely such a strong top 12. I'm thrilled for college basketball this upcoming season, man. I'm so excited. Let me know what you think in the comments below about Kentucky, top 15, about other teams surrounding them. Should they be higher? Should they be lower? Is it just right? You can let me know.